Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I stand proud to represent the borough of Hackney, proud that my borough voted 78.5% in favour of remaining in the European, and proud that my borough is home to 41,500 European citizens, representing 15% of our population. And I am delighted to follow the honourable member for Mid Sussex, whom I find myself in great accord in my distress that we are leaving the European Union and making a long-term big mistake for this country. I celebrate that the EU has brought peace and security to Europe for so many years. But I am dismayed to follow the Right Honourable Member for Halton, Price and Howden, who spent 20 minutes not telling us a great deal, but he was at the heart, at the front line of negotiation with the EU, and he walked away from the challenge, and now comes to decry the government and nearly every other option on the table, rather than when he had the chance, coming up with a solution. And the Honourable Member for Uxbridge, I see, Right Honourable Member Uxbridge, I see it in his place too. These were the people who wanted to leave and have walked away and now are not even content, even when we are leaving. And back in 2017, Mr. Speaker, I voted against triggering Article 50. Some might conclude that's simply because I represent a borough that voted so heavily to remain. But more than that, it was always practically impossible to disentangle from our long relationship with the European Union in just 2 years. And in my view, we should have thought much more carefully and thoughtfully about that. There are huge practicalities about leaving, which the Right Honourable Member for Halton, Price and Howden didn't seem to cover at all. My committee, and I'm honoured to chair, he's a former chair indeed of that committee, has produced 8 unanimous reports highlighting the challenges to government of preparing to leave the European Union. And the civil service has been hampered by the need to develop plans for 3 different scenarios, whether we have a deal or a no deal or a transition, and all the various complications within those. This approach has been costly, confusing, and it means that we lack real certainty, and businesses in particular, businesses in my constituency and up and down the country, are worried about the future. In short, Mr. Speaker, the government has been reckless in calling the referendum so quickly in the first place, with an ill-defined question that leaves nothing resolved, with no plan for what to do after that, not a single civil servant planning for an exit outcome, triggering Article 50 so quickly, again with no planning, and leaving preparations so late in the day. We're not even going to get the legislation through in Parliament, Mr. Speaker, possibly if we sit 24/7 between now and the end of March, but there's a real risk we won't get that done. The cost of uncertainty is also high in pounds and pence, and I'm proud to represent the tech sector in Shoreditch and the city fringe. But the cost of deal is particularly harsh for small businesses. If you take customs declarations alone, the estimate from HMRC itself is that SMEs will have additional costs of between £17 and £20 billion a year just to comply with new customs if we crash out with no deal. There will be huge supply chain disruption even if we have a deal, but let alone crashing out with no deal. And the huge issue of access to skills, as came out earlier in the House today, not even an understanding yet of what the new government's new proposals for immigration will be. And many in the tech sector rely on immigration from around the world, but including Europe, and that free movement has been crucial in filling some very particular skills gap. But the government has been silent on that as we approach this huge vote. So, Mr. Speaker, I back the Right Honourable Member for Leeds Central because I do believe that as a House we cannot sanction no deal. It cannot be an option. And I do not believe there is a majority in the House for no deal, but I do fear that it could happen by default, and that would be a real betrayal of our role and responsibilities to the British public. So I urge all colleagues to rule out no deal emphatically, that it is not a good solution on anyone's account. We also need to consider very seriously extending Article 50, or if not, at least having a very much clearer purpose out about extending the transition period. And to combat, as the Honourable Member for Hayes and Harlington said, that uncertainty that he highlighted, and I won't repeat. We need to get to a better solution. We need preparation and certainty for business. We need the understanding of what immigration will be. And we need to reach a consensus, or we have failed the British public. Many of my constituents have asked me to support a people's vote. Mr. Speaker, I certainly did not rush in to support this, and this is where, again, the Honourable Member for Mid Sussex and I think, share some of the same concerns about what it could do to our country and what it could do to the trust in having such referenda. The proposal is riddled with challenges, not least that it would take a great deal of time. We would have to have a majority in this House. The government would then have to heed that and set up push forward a bill, and that bill would have to have a majority, let alone what the question would be. But the government has so far failed this country every step of the way. The deal we have on the table is bad for Britain, and I cannot, in all honesty, support it. The government won't get it through, I don't believe, next week, Mr. Speaker. So Parliament then either needs to step up, and if we cannot agree, then there is no alternative but to return to the people, and with all the damaging consequences that that could lead to. Thank you.